Ever since the recent balance changes to StarCraft 2, the Zerg vs Protoss matchup has changed up quite a little bit, and if there's one strategy that most Zerg players will hate the most, it is probably the mass Skytoss style. At the very least, I have asked many Zerg players, and pretty much every single one of them does not like playing against carriers. Now in this video, I want to try and explain to you how to properly counter carriers when you see them on the ladder, because let's be honest, right now, as it is in StarCraft 2, the strategy is very common. Obviously, there are different variations, right? You got the one where they open up with a couple of Adepts, and then they transition into like 2 base and go for heavy carrier play, or they go for a bunch of Phoenixes early on, or sometimes even Tempest, but they always transition towards this super defensive style from Protoss, where they're basically just sitting back and massing out a lot of carriers. Now, like I said, there are different variations, but honestly, for the most part, you can treat them all in a very similar way. Now, what we are looking at today, as you may notice here, I am zooming in a little bit. It is a game that I played on the live stream just a couple of days ago. I figured out this strategy to really properly counter this with just a few weeks ago after asking Neuro. I would highly recommend checking out his stream, as well as, you know, watching a lot of professional Zerg players play against that strategy, because I, for the longest time, was struggling as well. I found out that, for example, units like the Corruptor are pretty great, but they can also be countered quite easily if your opponent randomly goes for Void Rays, and all things considered, it is not an easy build to play against. Now, in the earlier stages of the game, right, in this match right here, I will not figure out that it is going to be mass carrier play, but eventually, I will figure out exactly what it is my opponent will going for, or what my opponent is going for, rather, and obviously that is the point where I will need to start adjusting to the strategy that my opponent has in mind as well. Now, like I said, in the earlier stages of the game, it is very important to not just, you know, assume that your opponent is going for the carrier style. In many instances, they will be transitioning into something else. I would say maybe in like 20 to 30% or so of the games, you will indeed be seeing this mass carrier play, and that seems to be one of the few instances where you can indeed execute the strategy that I am about to explain to you. Now, as it is right now, right, it is very important that you still play your super standard go-to strategy. And for me, I've been going for a lot of like early Zergling speed into early Zergling drops and all kinds of shenanigans, while really trying to build up that economy. It's important to keep tabs of your opponent's third base. Generally speaking, you want to see that go down right around 5 minutes or so if you're up against a standard style, and you want to make sure that you counter any kind of early Adept, or for example, what are they called? The flying things. Can't believe I forgot it there, but of course the Oracle. You gotta make sure that you counter those units. Now, one very important thing that you have to keep in mind when playing against this strategy is that you want to kill it before it maxes out. I will be giving you a couple of tips as well on how to counter the carrier style if it does happen indeed to max out, but the main goal of the strategy is to kill it really before it lays eggs, because that is really the goal for Protoss as well. They know very well that if they manage to max out on an army based around, for example, carriers, Archons, High Templar, and a Mothership, if they manage to max out on that army composition, it is very difficult for Zerg to counter it. So it's key that you kill it before it gets to that point, and using the proper aggression and the proper amount of workers to back it up is very important. Now notice right here in the earlier stages of the game, I'm just playing standard, right? I got my link speed coming in right now. I did decide to go for a quick third base. I got my pneumatized carapace coming in, which is the overlord speed, and that is key. I would recommend going for the pneumatized carapace in almost every single match. This is the overlord speed upgrade. It will allow me to go for drops. It will allow me to go for all kinds of aggression in his main base as well. But in really most of the scenarios, what we are mostly looking for here is to do scouting with it. We really want to figure out what it is exactly that the Protoss is going for. Now, my opponent does decide to be rather aggressive here in the earlier stages of the game. It's key for me at this point in time that I don't lose all too much. That Oracle did come in very early here, so I was a little bit worried. But I don't think I actually lost a single worker here. No, I actually have not lost a single one just yet. And while I am forced to make quite a couple of Zerglings for the earlier stages of the game, it looks like we have managed to stay alive, and I'm just gonna continue onwards with the droning. Now, this is the point where you really want to start scouting out what it is your opponent is going for, okay? Like, this is the moment where your pneumatized carapace should be out, and if you don't have it, you can still go ahead and fly in the slow overlord as well, but this is ideally when you start scouting about what your Protoss opponent is going for. Now, one very important key to figuring out what Protoss is going for is the fact that we can now see a third base go down right there in the third base location before the 5-minute mark. So at this point, I know that we are in for a macro game, and that's important to realize because this will trigger me to start droning very, very heavily. Now, I know right now that I don't really need to worry about any kind of incoming aggression, at the very least in the next couple of minutes. So for the time being, I'm just going to start getting my tech, I'm going to start getting all of my upgrades. And in this instance, I'm still focusing on an army based around Zerglings, potentially Hydralisks and Ravagers, but also a couple of Banelings. So you can see me here playing my completely standard style. Now, very shortly, I will be flying in that Overlord into my opponent's main base as well. And I'm gonna go for the Hydra Den here, just by default. And so far, you can see this is just a super standard Zerg versus Protoss strategy. But this right here is the important tell. So I get into the main base of my opponent, and as far as the information that we have gotten so far throughout this game goes, we've managed to figure out that my opponent got the 3 bases out, and right now we see that there is indeed a double Stargate going down, and you can see the massive ships that are being produced in here. We now know that he is going for carrier. Now, as soon as you figure this out, right, there are a couple of different options. Technically speaking, you could go ahead and go for something, for example, like Corruptors, get some armor upgrades and do some damage on them. But in most scenarios, in my experience, that is not really what you are looking for, as Corruptors can quite easily be countered by, for example, just adding in a handful of Void Rays, or for example, by putting up a lot of static defense. In many instances, that is not going to be the ideal situation. But really, what it is most important to go for right now, besides the army compositions, is to get the suitable amount of economy to actually support this. Now I'm gonna once again unpause the game, but let's talk about that for just a little bit. So here's the thing about heavy carrier play. Whether or not they get there by going for Phoenixes, or whether or not they go for some Adapter RAS in the earlier stages of the game. What it all boils down to is that they're trying to slow down the Zerg as much as possible, after which they can settle down on their 2 or 3 bases and just simply start producing a ton of army. But really, once they start producing carriers, right, and I've played quite a little bit of Protoss as well, and I've been practicing this style a little bit as well as a Protoss player myself too. Once you get to this point in the game where you start producing carriers as the Protoss player, you do not attack, okay? You do not move out across the map, at the very least for the time being. Maybe if you've got some units left over, or maybe if you really badly want to warp in like a handful of Adepts, that can be helpful. But in the vast majority of the games, all Protoss wants to do right now is simply just sit back, macro as many things as possible, get as many carriers as possible, and go up to their maxed out army. Now, of course, they can be adding on High Templar as well, but really like the beef of the army is going to be carriers. So the first thing you need to do as Zerg is realize that that is the case, and just simply start making a ton of economy. You really want to try and get at least like 70 workers as soon as possible. This means that you need to make sure that you get your 4th base out as well. So as soon as you see that it's carrier play, get all the drones that you are looking for. Now, I would advise going roughly to about 70 or so. I'm not entirely sure how many I make in this game. I currently already have 74, and this is really the point where I start, you know, non-stop unit production. But step 1, get the 4 bases out and get a ton of economy. Step 2, and also a very important point, is to get as many upgrades as possible. Ideally, what we are looking for is to push right when +2/+2 finishes. Now, in this instance, I was going for the melee and the missile upgrade first and foremost, and obviously, since we are basing our army around Hydralisks and Queens here, I'll go over that in just a little bit. You know, I'm gonna have to get my armor and my carapace upgrade a little bit later on, but it's very important that first you get the economy and you get all of the upgrades going. Now, like I said, it is our goal to kill it before it lays eggs, to kill it before it maxes out. And the way I'm gonna do that is by making Hydralisks and Queens, okay? Now, it may sound a little bit odd to be pushing with Queens as well, but Queens and Hydras work brilliantly together. If you got roughly 70 workers, you can make them non-stop off of all of the hatcheries, and you can produce a ton of stuff. Now, it's really important for us that we push right as the upgrades finish, okay? It's really important for us to not let the Protoss max out. So establish the economy, start up the upgrades, and start producing army. Now, as far as the composition goes, right, because I may imagine this is a little bit weird, and I'm once again going to pause this for just a little bit. Hydras and Queens work brilliantly together, and the reason for that is that the Queens obviously have got transfuse, plus they don't cost any gas or any larva. That means that you can spend the rest of your supply on getting a ton of Hydralisk out as well. Now, like I said, Corruptors are an option, But for the most part, it seems that carriers just simply are pretty well equipped to deal with corruptors as it is. And in many instances, like as soon as Protoss sees it, they will start transitioning into a couple of Void Tray and just simply put down a ton of cannons at the base that you want to attack into. And that's going to allow them to sit back and eventually max out. And that's really like the golden rule. We don't want to go there. So for the most part, adding on the Hydralisk is really where it's at. Now, technically speaking, on paper, yes, Vipers are amazing, Infestors are amazing as well, but getting those out in time, in a timely manner, is usually not the correct way to go. And really, like, if you're gonna add on Infestor, the push is just gonna come like a minute or two later, and that's not what we're looking for. We want to push as soon as possible, as soon as upgrades finish up, with as big of an army as we can possibly create as well. So really what I'm looking for here is 70 workers, once again, at least like 70 workers, 4 bases, where I have 6 gas geysers in total, and the rest is all gonna go on minerals. Then I produce a non-stop Queens and non-stop Hydras while waiting for my upgrades to finish up, and once they do, that is exactly when I move across the map. So notice right here, it's 135 supply versus roughly 180, and I'm trying to advance here. Now, of course, you do need to make sure that you trigger as many photon overcharges as possible. As you can see, this is a super standard, position right here for Protoss as well, where he's got a bunch of carrier here in the back and a lot of cannons at the front. Exactly what he's going to do is photon overcharge the pylons and then just simply sit on the photon cannons. And obviously, if you were going for Corruptor, those Corruptors would just get absolutely shredded. Instead, what you want to do is try and trigger as many of the photon overcharges as possible. Attack here for the time being, and then just back up. Kill whatever interceptors you can find, but really, you want to simply just wait for your Queens to make their way across the map, and transfuse as many units as possible. Now, while this is going on, I'm still producing, still trying to make as many units as possible. I did morph in a couple of Banes as well, with the leftover Zerglings that I had, which is fine and dandy, but not really the main goal here. They're quite okay at killing some of the buildings. But here we go. So I want to start pushing. Now, ideally, I would want to get underneath the interceptors, or underneath the carriers rather, and target fire those down. But interceptors reproduce rather slowly. Instead, usually what's easiest to do is simply just sit there and kill all of the interceptors. Of course, you want to transfuse low HP, Hydralisk, and you want to try and keep your Queens alive as well, but you simply want to try and push forward here while producing a big army to back this up with as well. And once you get rid of all of the interceptors, the army is quite easy to kill. I mean, interceptors did recently get a little bit more expensive, nerfing this strategy a little bit, and you can see that Protoss is, not that high in economy here. And even though this is like the most aggressive version of like the carrier play, this seems to be the correct answer to pretty much every single instance where you are going up against this strategy. So first step, 70 workers, get +2/+2, start producing, off of your 4 bases, a ton of Hydras and Queens, and push right when the upgrades finish up. And honestly, I have not lost a game with this. Now, say for example that your opponent somehow, some way magically holds on, probably because you misplayed, but let's say that is the instance. One of the great additions here that also may be uncommon and something that you haven't anticipated or, decided to go for just yet, and something that a lot of pro gamers have been doing, I didn't really think of it either before I saw them play it, is to add on Ultralisk in the later stages of the game. Now, the fact of the matter is that we are already getting carapace upgrades. We're already trying to get a maxed out Hydra army, right? And if you manage to get the chitinous plating upgrade on the Ultras, they're gonna have a ton of armor, and interceptors will be target firing them down, and they deal super low amounts of damage to carriers as it is, or to Ultralisk as it is. So the interceptors will barely be able to kill the Ultralisk. And in many instances, it's just gonna allow you to get a stupid powerful army out as well. And at that point, if you somehow, some way allowed the Protoss to max out, you probably want to reconsider the strategy that you were playing in the first place. But if it gets to that point, adding on Ultras is great, adding on Vipers is great, adding on, more Queens and Hydras is great, and adding on, for example, Infestors is great as well. But I would highly recommend giving this strategy a try. Now, it all comes down, though, to figuring out what it is the Protoss is going for. And because of that, I would not, skip out on the Pneumatized Carapace upgrade. I've recently started incorporating it into my own play as well. It is one of the few upgrades, like the overload speed upgrade is obviously what I'm talking about here, that really allows you to continuously scout out what your opponent is doing. And while carriers may be scary here initially, you can clearly see that my opponent right now is just low on resources. Past the 11-minute mark or so, the main base will be running very low on resources, and because I sniped that third, I know that if I still have my own economy and I can keep on producing, I will simply be able to make more stuff that will eventually kill him. So make sure to not let it max out. Make sure you get to the point where you've got a massive amount of Hydras and Queens, and in almost every single instance, you're gonna be able to counter it. If you've got any questions, feel free to let me know down below in the comment section of this video. I will try and keep an eye out and answer each and every one of them. And other than that, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button and to go ahead and follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Links are in the description, as well as subscribe so you get a notification as soon as I upload more. I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, alright? And I'll see you in the next one.